Exactly 1 week from today, millions of children all across this province will be returning to school. This should be a time of excitement, of new beginnings, of opportunities to reconnect with classmates and teachers. But instead, it's a time of anxiety, worry, and frustration by parents, educators, staff, and children, because the Ford government has failed to make the necessary investments to contain community spread of COVID-19 and to keep our schools safe. Yesterday, a diverse group of stakeholders met with all three opposition parties to talk about how we prevent a fourth wave. And it was very clear. All the experts said schools should be the last to close and the first to reopen. Experts told us that we need a vaccine certificate now. But the Premier continues his delays and his dithering. Meanwhile, COVID-19 cases continue to rise, hospitalizations continue to rise, and ICU units admissions are on the rise. And I want to make it clear to the Premier and the people of Ontario, every day matters. We should have had a vaccine certificate weeks ago. Every day the Premier continues to delay matters. It matters about keeping our schools safe. It matters about keeping our businesses open. It matters about containing the spread of the viruses. And let's be clear, we have to keep our schools open for in-class learning. Let's be reminded that children under 12 are not eligible for the vaccine. And that's exactly why Ontario needs a comprehensive back-to-school plan that ensures safe in-class learning for educators, staff, and students. So it's never too late for the Premier to do the right thing. And that's why we need the Premier to come out of hiding and act decisively with a plan to keep our schools safe for in-class learning. And that's why today, 1 week before school is set to resume, the Ontario Greens are once again calling on the Ford government to implement the Ontario Greens Safe Schools Plan, which includes mandatory vaccination for all teachers and education staff, investing in better and adequate PPE, including N95 masks for students, staff, and teachers, lowering class sizes to 15 students so we can maintain safe physical distancing, a robust and accessible testing and contact tracing system to help contain outbreaks, ensuring as many students over 12 as possible are vaccinated, including adding the COVID-19 vaccine to the list of mandatory vaccines that are already required for eligible students. Implementing a province-wide database to monitor how many education workers, staff, and eligible students are fully vaccinated. And immediate improvements in ventilation, including HEPA filters properly sized for classrooms. We're also calling on the Ford government to ensure that we address the mental health challenges that so many students are facing. And that means committed to eliminating any hybrid learning plans or quadmesters that have negative impacts on students' mental health and the quality of their learning. Ensuring that we have a sufficient number of mental health service providers to eliminate the unacceptable wait times for young people seeking to access mental health supports. And implementing a province-wide school lunch program to ensure that every student has access to healthy local food. We must And I want to emphasize this. We must do everything possible to keep our schools open and to ensure that students and staff are safe. And I want to be clear that Ontario Greens are ready to work across party lines to make this happen. Keeping our schools open and safe for students and staff is bigger than politics. It is vital at this moment that we put people before politics. This is about the well-being of our children, their safety, and their future. Yesterday, a diverse group of stakeholders and opposition party members worked together to discuss a plan for mandatory vaccines and vaccine certificates. And so today, I asked the Premier, will you join us? Will you join us in putting forward a plan to contain the fourth wave, keep our schools and businesses open, and utilize all the tools in our toolbox to make it happen? I'm happy to answer any questions.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you do have a question, please press star 1. Your first question comes from Adam Donaldson with Guelph Politico. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, Mike. I was wondering if I could get you to just comment on something I've been hearing from people, and these are people who are not your sort of who you would think would go to anti-lockdown rallies, but they're voicing a lot of reservation and a lot of concern about potential fourth wave lockdown, and they're just not going to take it. In their words, that's literally one woman's words. Can you talk a bit about that anxiety that people have about maybe going into another lockdown?
Yeah, Adam, I have so much empathy for people who are worried about and have anxiety about another lockdown. That is exactly why I'm being so relentless in my advocacy for a vaccine certificate program, for mandatory vaccines for educators, healthcare workers, people who work with the most vulnerable, because we need to deploy all the tools in our toolbox to contain the spread of the virus and to prevent a fourth wave lockdown. Our students need to be in class with their teachers and their fellow students. Our small businesses need to stay open. People need to be able to go to work and feel that they can safely connect with their family, their friends, and others in our community. And so that's why I am telling the Premier, stop dithering, stop delaying, stop the half measures. We need decisive action, and we need to make the investments to prevent another lockdown.
Follow-up?
Yes, thank you. It's widely reported that Cabinet is discussing the vaccine certification program right now. What do you think that should, or do you think, I guess, what do you think the program should look like? I'm assuming that there's probably a lot of still uncertainty about what that is precisely going to look like. But in terms of exact detail, what does a vaccine certification look like to your mind?
Yeah, well, first of all, Adam, I think we need to listen to the public health experts, the business leaders, the mayors, the educators, the healthcare professionals who all came together to meet with members of the opposition parties yesterday and talked about the key components of what a vaccine certificate program would look like. And I'll just share a few of those with you. First of all, it needs to be consistent across the province. One of the challenges we're facing is this hodgepodge approach that's popping up in the absence of the Premier showing any leadership on this issue. Secondly, it needs to provide legal protections to small businesses, to healthcare institutions, and others who are charged with enforcing the vaccine certificate program, because there likely will be pushback. Third, it needs to have a sunset clause. We need to be very clear that this is a temporary measure because we're in an unprecedented public health crisis. and that there will be a sunset clause for the certificates to no longer be in place. It needs to be simple and easily accessible for people, and we need to ensure that it's available for everyone. So obviously, looking at what other jurisdictions have done, so we don't need to reinvent the wheel in Ontario, but you look at places that have brought in QR codes, for example, on people's smartphones. We need to ensure that those same QR codes, if that's the approach we take, are also available for people who do not have smartphones. And we need to make sure it can be easily implemented by businesses, especially small businesses. And then finally, we need better communication from the province about why we need a certificate program, how it's going to benefit people, why it's vital to helping avoid another lockdown, and how the program will work. Those are the elements that the experts talked about, and I strongly encourage the Premier and Cabinet to follow their advice, but to stop delaying. On Friday when we heard that the government was backtracking on their opposition to a vaccine certificate, I think there was a lot of hope. Many of us were hoping that an announcement would have been made on Friday. Then we were hoping it was going to happen yesterday, and then hoping it was going to happen today. And so certainly I just want to say to the Premier right now, every day matters. We need decisive action.